Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Centimetre Perfect AFL podcast. We have made it through 6 rounds of the Premiership season so far, 6 3/4 if you count opening round. Not only was this a longer round than usual, we had all 9 teams. We had it spread over 4 or 5 days of football with Easter. I hope everyone else enjoyed their chocolate as much as I did. But Liam, we also enjoyed a really crazy round of football too, where not a lot made sense.
No, not a lot at all. Like it was some big wins for some underdog teams. There was some blowouts. There was only probably one good game, which is literally just finished at time of recording today. It was a higgledy-piggledy hot mess. So much so that you'll be able to hear about how higgledy-piggledy I found it when it comes to our tipping show that we'll come to on YouTube later. We'll talk about that later, Jesse, because I'm sure you'll want to talk about it. But where can people find us?
They can find us at cmperfect_AFL on Instagram, over on YouTube, Centimetre Perfect AFL Podcast, along with their preferred podcasting platform, be that Amazon, Apple, or Spotify. So many places you can find us. Liam has really ramped up the Instagram content as well, so make sure you do jump over there. Your little jump cut of the shenanigans of Milo last week was well received. In fact, once that got posted within 5 minutes, I had cackling in my ears about how funny Milo's behaviour was.
Hey,
rest assured, it was actually not that funny at the time.
what you guys saw was some very small clips of what was a much larger Milo issue. When trying to record that episode, it was not all happy days. That is for sure. But no, that's okay, Jesse. I mean, look, it's all just little clips from our show. So little bite-sized forms. We like that. But of course, we'd like you to listen to the whole thing. If you've got any comments, you've got anything to say, anything to add, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Jesse, last week you gave us a nice little opinion piece. Not much to talk about in the way of news this week, I wouldn't say. So do you have anything you would like to speak about this week?
I do, actually.
Of course you do.
Funny for someone coming on a podcast has things they want to talk about. Look, I wanted to talk about Fremantle.
Okay.
Because to preempt our conversations about the games later in this podcast, I think it's fair to say that Fremantle's loss to Melbourne is one of the most disappointing of the week. And reflecting after the final siren had gone in front of 25,000 people at the MCG, it got me thinking. Fremantle were, at that point in time, in the 8, but at the mercy of Dogs flogging Saints or Saints winning. One of those did happen. Dropping out of the 8 early on with a 3-3 record and a tough month coming up where you're probably only, if you can get 2-2 out of the next month for Fremantle, which we'll talk about later, you're happy. All of a sudden...
If we could, that'd be a minor miracle, I would say.
So you're looking at a 5-5 record, probably best case scenario, 10 games into the season. So basically the halfway point. And that got me thinking, what has Fremantle actually achieved in the Justin Longmuir era? Now, before we say in what era have they achieved anything, we got Tony Modra once. That was pretty cool.
That was cool.
But in all joking aside, you know, at this point in time, the football club's now 30 years without anything tangible to show for it in terms of silverware. And staring down the barrel of what looks like is very, very possibly another disappointing season, which reminded me that 2025 is the last year of a very highly touted document that the Fremantle Football Club put out at the end of the 2021 season, which was the strategic plan to take the club from, it's got 2021, but really, in the grand scheme of things, it's 2022 to 2025 is the seasons you're focusing on within this document.
Sure.
So a bit of context there. Fremantle had just missed the finals in 2021, had the opportunity, blew it in the last round against St Kilda in quite a bad 10-goal loss. An unexplainable loss, really, I think, at that point, because Saints, as usual, weren't that hot at that point. So at that point in time, Justin Longmuir has just completed his second season as a coach. You get a mulligan for COVID, as I think all coaches probably should have for 2020. You get to 2021. I think there was improvement, but there was something left on the table, and that's going to be a really common theme throughout this conversation.
Okay.
2022, make it to a semi-final, got some big scalps during that season, beat Melbourne at the G. Melbourne, who had won 12 in a row, not who had lost one of their last 12 and were rubbish in most of those games. They'd gotten rolling. They were looking good. They were winning derbies consistently. in 22, there was good signs. Lose to Collingwood in the semi-final, positives. I think at that point, a positive result. 23, the wheels fall off. 24, looks like things are getting back to where they need to be, and then the wheels fall off. And 25, I don't think they've even put the wheels back on from last season yet, based on what we've seen so far.
Yep.
So that's context, Liam. Before I tell you what the KPIs that the football club set themselves were for that period, 2022 to 2025, keeping in mind that there's still a few months to play out in this, what's your reflection on that 3.25 season period from Fremantle?
So it's tricky, right? So obviously, as everyone who listens to this podcast knows, we are Freo supporters, so we are a little bit more passionate about this than most others, I would say. But you're asking me what I think the KPIs were and how we're moving towards them, or how I just think the last few years.
Just general commentary on how you think we've gone on field as a football club.
I think that as a football club, there's a lot to like, but. Unfortunately, and you can see that when you look at it, you talk to fans, you talk to everybody. There's that level of optimism that always kind of underlies anything we do when we speak about Freo Dockers. It's like an optimism mixed in with reality, and the reality is that we're expecting to lose pretty much every game because we actually don't know what team's going to show up. Now, while that may be true, literally for most of our 30-year history, like that's pretty much been a constant. I think the last few years there's been a bit more. Not urgency, but a bit more, I suppose a little bit of urgency, but expectation placed upon the team because of the people we brought in. We're starting to get trades right. We're starting to manage our list better. Like we're starting to put those pieces into play. But on field, that to me is where everything's being let down. You can see what we can do. You know, the proof has been in the pudding for at least 1 year. Why the massive regression? Now people can talk about obviously the players. We've got a young list, sure. They can talk about injuries, but everyone's got injuries. They can talk about whatever they want. But at the end of the day, like nothing's really changed. Like I don't see anything in our gameplay that's changed and adapted, which you can clearly see in other teams. Hawthorn, pure example. You can see how quickly they've been able to turn their stuff around and their game around in very, very, very little time, a year and a bit. We don't seem to have any of that under our sleeve. We don't have any gumption. There's no passion. There's no like the will to win. And we'll talk about today's game in the game recap later on, but those were two teams who wanted to win that game of football.
Yes. I
don't feel Freo has had that in some time. I don't feel like we've been in a position, the players have been in a position of winning enough to be in that frame of mind. Yeah, that's my thoughts. I mean, I feel like we've got so much potential, and it all feels to be being left by the wayside.
So let's talk these KPIs. Now, keep in mind, a lot of these lines do get not blurred, but they do get blurred. They do get blurred because a lot of the KPIs are joint AFL and AFLW metrics. Now, in no way is this meant to undervalue the Freo AFLW side, but I think it's a fair statement to say the majority of Fremantle fans, the majority, would be more interested in on-field success for the men's side than the women's side. Probably. There'd be some that go the other way, of course, sure, and there's some that, like myself, that would love to see success on both sides. Mm-hmm. But I think if you asked 100 Fremantle fans on the street to talk about the Dockers, the majority are going to talk about the men's side. And so, apart from one key metric, this dialogue is going to focus mostly on the men's team's performance.
Okay.
So 2021 to 2025, key metrics. At least one premiership for the AFL and AFLW program. Hasn't happened yet. The men's side, I would be shocked if they could win a premiership this year based on what we've seen in the first 6 weeks of the season. The AFLW side did make the semis last year, so that is a possibility for the 2025 season, which of course hasn't started yet. Mm. But I think that's fair to say unlikely.
Okay.
And certainly from the Dockers side being the men's side, not even close. So first KPI already, big thumbs down. In terms of have we hit that? Not at all. At least 3 top 4 finishes between the AFL and AFLW sides. And again, it's unclear to me whether this is, and I'd have to go back and listen to the keynote, I'm just not going to, but it's written in an unclear way as to whether this is combined or separate.
Well, that's what I was going to just quickly interject with. It feels really bizarre for them to merge those two together.
Yeah. And in the document, it's unclear.
It's almost as if they're trying to lump them both together in case one of them has success. They can be like overall success.
Yes.
And again, like you said, this is not a slight on the women's game, but they're two different beasts. They're two very different beasts. Like the AFL and Freo has been around for 30 years. The competition obviously a lot longer. Like that kind of has to be focus number one. And it feels bizarre that they're lumping their KPIs together. It just kind of doesn't feel like it's leading itself to success.
So 3 top 4 finishes hasn't happened. In fact, you're probably talking not even close territory there as well. Second of the 6 overarching metrics is culture. I don't think that's really relevant to what we're talking about. It talks about employee engagement surveys. I don't think we have access to that data. I didn't see it when I looked for it today. So we're going to skip culture and talk about members and fans. And this is what I really want to focus on.
Okay.
So this is goals for the end of 2025. So noting one of these, I think 2 of these could still happen. Although I would say both of those are highly unlikely. The other one is even less likely, although could still technically happen as well.
Okay.
So keep in mind, at the end of last season, just over 60,000 members for the Dockers. The goal for the end of this year is 80.
Okay.
I can tell you right now that's not going to happen. Unless you start giving away free memberships to drag your KPI over the line.
Hey, $10 memberships like the Tassie Devils did. Give you a sticker, away you go. Numbers reached.
The old KPI by technicality. But that very clearly, based on what we're seeing, is not going to happen.
Yeah.
Because you're talking 63,000 members at this point. Based on last season's performance and the first quarter of this season, I can't see an extra 15,000 minimum, absolute minimum, signing up to get you close to that 80. Not going to happen.
No.
Average attendance at Optus Stadium home games of 50,000. Now, noting we've had 2 games so far at Optus as Fremantle home games. Fremantle Sydney was 43,000. Not even close. Freo Dogs was 41,000. Not even close. Last year, the average was 46, which is better, but also in the grand scheme of things, not even close. If you're talking a discrepancy of 4,000 people every game, that's not really getting particularly close to your KPI, I wouldn't say.
It's not, but like I guess you look at it from this. I know I'm sure you have as well. But if you got a KPI or an average last year of 46, right, and you're aware of this, I'm sure you've worked where targets are there, and you want to get a stretch target. You're not going to set your target at the following year. You're going to always set up.
But this goal was set back in 21.
Gotcha. Okay.
So you're saying you're going to build to this.
Gotcha. Okay.
So yeah, you're totally right. If you're sitting there at the end of last season with 46, you're saying, yeah, we want to push for 50 totally. But if you're talking a strategic plan, and this is where the club should be in 4 years, to be 4,000 off and then regress in the last season of that time frame, and I know it's only been 2 games, but I personally have noticed it, the difference in crowd numbers.
Yeah.
It feels different at games this season.
Well, success brings people. That's just how it is. That's why you don't see anyone usually, or until this year, at People First Stadium in Gold Coast. What's the incentive for them to go? They're going to go watch a losing team. Some people are diehards, and they go every game, present company included.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but a lot of people don't have that same relationship with football.
No, there's casual fans.
Yeah.
And that's totally fine.
Sure.
But then you need to be able to convert those casual fans. You're talking about targets and KPIs and performance from membership department. And look, without going too deep into detail, I personally have been disappointed, I think, with the way that members in general with Fremantle have been treated in the last 6 months or so. I think there's been things that the club could have done differently, and that's a different conversation entirely. But I think little things like this, and you talk about member engagement and fan engagement, I don't think they're hitting the mark, personally.
Okay.
The last key metric here for them is an average attendance of 6,000 at Fremantle Oval, which is going to be for AFLW games. It's not specifically written, but if it's average 50k at Optus, we can make the insinuation at 6k at Fremantle Oval. Keep in mind, this document was written at the end of 2021. The average attendance last season for 2024 at Freo Oval, 2,678. With a key caveat, that includes an elimination final. So that does distort the numbers. And again, in no ways is meant to have a go at the women's program, but this is purely from a perspective of targets versus reality. So I'm going to go through the attendances in the AFLW season for 2024. Keeping in mind the benchmark is 6,000. Working from the start of the season to the end. 2,669, 1,633, 2,259, 2,051, 2,520, and then elimination final crowd of 4,934.
Big bump. And also significantly off the target of 6,000. Now, in the time that this target's been in place for Fremantle to have 6,000 average attendance at Fremantle Oval, how many times do you think they've cleared 6,000 in a game? Just a singular game. None?
Not once.
Yeah.
The closest they've gotten since the end of 2021 was January of 2022 for an AFLW Derby, which was 5,500.
Okay.
That's not good. And I think that you can talk about growth in the women's game and the ways to promote that side of things. And again, that's got plenty of other podcasts who do stick with the AFLW who know what they're talking about. Go and seek out those. But straight away, as a Dockers member, I can safely say I get very little engagement put to me or incentive to go to AFLW games as a paid-up member of the men's side because they separate the packages, which I guess in some ways does make sense if you're only going to be marketing for people who want to go and watch the AFLW. But that surely is just segmenting your market even smaller. Purely from a Dockers perspective, if you're not promoting that side of things, hey, we're all wearing the same shade of purple here.
Yeah.
If you're not making that point and that argument and advocating for your AFLW side with your broader membership base, how do you expect to get half your target for this, which they're not even doing?
Is there anything in that document that states like what like that's the KPI, right? I'm not too sure if this is where you're going to go on from here. But are there any action plans in there to kind of determine how they're going to do that? Like, are they just
nothing public?
Nothing
it's
public.
It's very buzzword synergy, etc., etc. And look, I would like to think there was a plan for a lot of these things. They talk about an enhanced AFLW match day experience at Fremantle Oval, but that's the sentence. That's all. No further elaboration on what that looks like. Just an enhanced match day experience. What does that actually mean?
I feel like a lot of this comes back to the assumption that they're going to improve, both teams. That's what it feels like the assumption comes back to, because if you're going to... Football and sport in general very rarely works. You very rarely get any sort of increases in crowd stuff, like I said before, unless you've got a winning team. Like, yes. This is why the Eagles were able to build their membership to over 100,000 and have a waiting list, is because very quickly they were very good. Obviously, at the moment, they're going through a bit of a lull, and you'll see who the real fans are who stick with them. You should do that as well, Eagles fans.
And I think the majority are, in all fairness. I mean, they're still out drawing Fremantle.
Well, yeah, of course they are, because it's still the Eagles, right? I think I have had chats with a couple of Eagles fans like, oh, I'm going to give my membership. I'm like, are you? You're going to give up your membership and then go to the back of the waiting line to get one again when they start getting good? That's stupid. But they've had that success.
Yep.
They've had that run. They've built a dynasty, and sure, that's based on there being only one team here for a good 15 years after
they had 8 years. It's not. I don't like that narrative, and it's not a go at you, Liam, but it's a narrative that seems to be peddled.
I thought it was longer.
1987 to 1995. There's a big narrative that seems to go around some Fremantle fans, and they get really upset by the notion that West Coast are a bigger club, and they draw. Oh, well, the West Coast were here first. Less than a decade. Like, yeah, being first helps.
Yeah.
But I know plenty of people who were alive before 1987 who support Fremantle. It's not, yeah, you are old. But,
case in point.
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying? Like, there are plenty of people who are past retirement age, let's say, who are Fremantle supporters. Plenty. Sure. There are plenty who are West Coast supporters. So I don't like that narrative. But to draw it back to what you're saying in general, you're absolutely right, Liam. Success does breed stronger off-field performance too. But then you look at some of these KPIs, they look like they're going to hit their financial ones, which is net profit every year and 5 million cash reserves. They're about 4,600,000 off last year's report, and they added plus 400K in that, so they should get very close to that, if not surpass it. So financially, the club's doing fine, but we talk about performance a lot on this podcast, and Justin Lemieux comes up in this conversation, as he will later when we talk about the game. But I look at this, lay it bare, and you talk about Simon Garlick's performance and KPIs. I don't think this is good enough. You're talking red cross after red cross after red cross after red cross. And if you want to look at, you talk about on-field success, well, the simple solution would have been to swing the axe 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And we're here having this conversation now. That may not fix everything.
Sure.
But you're probably not talking a regression of, 4,000 fans through the turnstiles per game in the first couple of games of the season, where expectations were still reasonably high. I think they're through the floor now after Saturday, but there was still an element of expectation. The Dogs game was after a derby win in Sunday, same time slots, regression of crowd numbers. Friday night will be interesting, under public holiday conditions. But really,
I think Friday will be big. Anzac Day always brings a big crowd for the Len Hall game. It always does.
But if you're not getting over 45,000, I think that's a real worry for the football club.
I think if, I know you're not speaking specifically about the Len Hall game this week, but I think if that pulls anywhere around the 45 mark, I'd be like, oh dear, oh dear, because that's a big game for Freo. Yeah, that's a big game, like for in terms of culture, in terms of the importance of that particular day. It's a massive one, and a lot of the Freo fans get right behind it. So if you're, and I can't remember the last time if we've actually ever had it on Anzac Day proper. So
I think we may have against the Dogs when Arthur Leggett, who recently passed away,
he did
actually read out recited the ode, which was a lovely moment.
It was.
So of course our sympathies to the Leggett family as well, given that is still fairly recent at the time of this recording. I believe that was on Anzac Day. If it wasn't, it was very close. But regardless, it's the Len Hall tribute game is a huge game for the football club. It's and you talk about Fremantle being a working class town as well, historically. You know, it does bring in a lot of those values that the football club is built on, and that makeshift that you get from working on the docks, Dockers, that side of things. A lot of that does shine through with, I guess, war, for lack of a better term, and the experiences and the trepidations faced by veterans, which is honoured as part of this game. It's a huge game of huge significance for the football club, and taking the emotion aside, you'd expect the fans to turn up.
You would.
And as you said, if they're not, that's a real worry for where this team's at.
So then where to, Jesse? What to do? What's the go-to?
Well, this strategic plan's about to die. It gets killed at the end of the year because that's how years work. So that's a big...
I've forgotten how years work, Jesse. They all fly by with such
hard.
Rapid pace and time.
So you're going to assume there's going to be a new one. But I think laying this bare, I think there needs to be an internal review, or at least a serious consideration of what has gone wrong, because you can't look at this document and say, well, we've achieved what we wanted to achieve.
Yeah.
Even off-field, your numbers aren't there. You know, Richmond were awful last season. Their crowd numbers were still solid, and their membership base was still excellent.
Yeah.
West Coast, you don't need to look across the road. They've been awful for this almost the entire duration of this strategic document. And yet, supporters and metrics-wise, they're still comfortably ahead.
Yeah.
So there's been no meaningful inroads. It's stuff about partnerships and branding, and I'm sure, you know, there's plenty of other conversations to have on that. But you want to talk about directly on-field and supporter, I guess, engagement. They're probably the two biggest components of a football club's success. Are you getting fans through the gates, and are you winning? Neither of those are happening on either program, and that's a problem.
Yeah. No, I think we're both in the camp of like, and obviously there's going to be people in both sides of this argument. Some people still think we should stick the course with JLo. Some people should, think anyone who says otherwise are nuffies, all that kind of stuff. At the end of the day, it's not working on any front, And I know we're only 6 rounds into the season, and
I think you put Simon Garlick in this boat as well. I think it's very easy, and I'm probably guilty of this too. It's very easy to put all the problems of the football club's fair to Justin Lemon. I think many of the problems in terms of on-field performance, you can absolutely put those there. But I wanted to do this piece because I wanted to show that right now the issues with the Fremantle Football Club are more than just a bad game plan. And it's the fact that we can't achieve what we're setting out to achieve, or what we're committing in the public domain to achieve. It's very different for this document to be in a desk drawer of the President's office at the Arc and be completely buried there. But this was put out into the public domain. It was ridiculed at the time, mostly by West Coast fans. It was ridiculed at the time, and it's in the cold light of day, barring an extraordinary miracle that, frankly, I would be baffled if it happened. It's going to be everything that those ridiculing West Coast fans said it would be, which is a failure.
Which sucks to admit, especially to a West Coast fan. Yeah, no, it's an interesting conversation, Jesse. I think, and obviously it's not just Freo who are in this predicament. I'm sure there are other teams who have got this. And I think we can talk about Freo given that's, who we support. But you probably could copy and paste this across several other teams in the competition, and you probably find similar issues and concerns. But at the moment, it's just not something's not working for the old Dockers at the moment. And I think some wholesale changes are a good idea, Jesse.